Trade Deadline Friday here on TribLIVE Radio. Ken Laird, Kevin Gorman, Trib columnist, in for Guy Junker today here on the TribLIVE Radio Morning Sports Report. And the Pirates have made some moves, Kevin. And let's talk with the closer that they added. Of course, Joe Blanton earlier in the week, and Joakim Soria comes in from the Tigers. He may not be a closer here. Likely will not be. Melanson will keep the role. You could argue he deserves to be the ninth inning guy. But regardless, what do you make of Neil Huntington's work here, adding two pieces to the bullpen?
I think they've done a good job so far in the pieces that they've added. Even when you go back last week with Aramis Ramirez, I don't know that the Pirates should be finished. I think there's still a move or two to be made. But for the people that were looking for a big name, the people that were looking for a Cole Hamels or a David Price, or even a little lower down the pecking order.
Mike Leake, et cetera,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys. I mean, Johnny Cueto. There's a lot of guys that have changed places this past week. And I don't think the Pirates were ever in that market. I don't think that was I don't think that's their style. I don't think that's their business model. I don't think that's what they were going to do. So I get a sense of disappointment from the fans, especially in light of last night's loss, that they haven't done enough
because of A.J. Burnett's.
Well, when you see A.J. Burnett, now people are saying, well, maybe they should add a starting pitcher. And it's kind of like, well, if A.J. Burnett's not good enough to be your number 3 pitcher come playoff time and really here, more importantly, down the stretch, then I don't know that the Pirates were really in position to make much of an upgrade. I'm not against them, dealing a prospect or two to make that move. In fact, when you saw what the Rangers gave up for Cole Hamels, it was the equivalent of dealing Austin Meadows, Josh Bell, and I believe Hansen, the shortstop, or second baseman, shortstop, second baseman.
Right.
So that wouldn't have been a big price to pay in terms of what you're giving up to get in return for an ace who is under contract for, I believe, another 3 years this year and another 3, maybe 4.
But old in his 30s.
But he's 31 years old, and he has, I think, $75 million on the hook at least, if not more. So, that's the thing that's holding up the Pirates. But what they got, I like it. I thought the weaknesses were that they needed to get somebody to play third base. Obviously, that was an immediate need just to get them through that week. But I thought the bullpen was the biggest problem. I still think first base is an issue, and I think that's what needs to be addressed. But I like what they've done in the bullpen because their bullpen's stronger. The only move that has me scratching my head a little bit is DFAing Vance Worley.
Yeah.
He's performed admirably. That may be more of an attitude thing than a performance thing because he's not.
I think his performance had declined in the bullpen role that they were trying to plug him into. He'd been a little wonky in long relief. So it came down to Blanton over Worley in terms of who we trust.
And the other thing is, there's still a possibility that, I'm not going to roll out the possibility that Neil Huntington could go out and add a starter.
Doesn't sound likely, though.
No,
judging by Travis Sawchuk's piece today.
He could add a starter who could potentially bump somebody like a Jeff Locke or Charlie Morton into a bullpen role come playoff time, and then you have a guy there for long relief.
Neil Huntington, quote, "We don't see the ability to acquire somebody we would drop in the rotation ahead of our current starters," end quote. Talking yesterday to reporters.
Yeah, that tells me that they're probably not.
Before A.J. went out and wet the bed.
Yeah.
The third starter.
Well, the thing about A.J. is, I'm watching part of the game last night. I didn't watch the whole game because, it kind of got out of hand there. But, a few plays here and there could change the dynamic of everything,
Maybe, but his velo was way down. Velocity was,
But then it went back up. He was hitting in the low 90s.
Started the rise.
In the fifth, wasn't it the fifth inning that he was hitting the 90s?
He made it out of the fifth inning.
Yeah. Was it the fourth inning? What was the inning where he had the bases loaded jam?
That was it.
That was the fifth?
And he got pulled, yeah.
Yeah, but he was hitting in the low 90s at that point. So his velocity came back up, and Clint Hurdle was talking about how his changeup was where he wanted it to be. But he's a guy who doesn't respond to adversity very well, The Billy Hamilton thing, that one play there, he kind of had a meltdown because of that. And, it was one of those weird things that happened. Not too many guys could beat that play the way Billy Hamilton did. I don't know. You could probably count them on one hand, the number of guys that can make that play. But he did nothing to keep him on first or second base. He basically conceded a run as soon as he allowed him on base.
Well, he might need a little bye-bye time, just a little shutdown, little
Well, that's certainly possible, and that's why I wonder why you let go of like a guy like Vance Worley, who could have come in and maybe given you a spot start or two. Maybe Blanton does that, maybe, but he's a guy who got DFA'd by Kansas City. Where's his head right now?
Yeah,
that's another question. But I could see potentially them giving him a rest somewhere along the way and saying, hey, get your head together, get your arm ready, because I'm not sure if we're seeing a guy who has dead arm or if we're seeing a guy who, was maybe riding that high of the All-Star first half a little bit too well.
It's progress for Neil Huntington. Typically, he doesn't make moves at this time of the year. In August, he's made a few. The Marlon Byrd acquisition, Justin Morneau, they've come later. Maybe he could still do that with a starter if they get into a real jam in August.
That's the thing about the trade deadline, Ken.
Yeah, it's not the end.
No, you still have between now and the end of August to acquire guys. They just have to clear waivers.
Yep.
And I think we make such a big deal about the trade deadline, but baseball has now kind of conceded that it's not all an end-all, be-all. We see some big moves being made. I think that's more for the teams that are trying to dump the salary than anything, that they're trying to get out from under those salaries. But the thing that I looked at yesterday was the teams that made the big moves last year, the teams that were the trade deadline winners, those weren't the teams that made it to the World Series. You didn't see San Francisco and Kansas City making major moves. They made moves, but they didn't make big moves, not like Oakland did. Remember Oakland went out and got, I think it was Lackey
and Lester.
And Lester and Samardzija, right?
Lackey, Lester and Samardzija.
It's Lester and Samardzija. Yeah, but it's... you see some of these teams making those moves. Detroit went out and got David Price. A year later, they're dealing him. I don't necessarily. I think for the fantasy sports fans out there, this is a big, exciting time. But for the people who are watching their teams, if you're making major moves at the trade deadline, that tells me there's a hole on your team. That tells me there's something missing. And with the Pirates, I think that there is something missing, but I don't think it's a major hole. I think that these are things where they can, pick and choose and fill their spots. I could be wrong, but
in Neil Huntington, Kevin Gorman trust. Of course, he didn't like the Zane Smith trade either from the early '90s. But we won't get into that.
We can't blame Neil for that.
Kevin Gorman, Ken Laird, TribLIVE Radio.